Buddy, it's Saturday, October 5th, 2024, and I want to talk to you all today about the upcoming election and how to make a decision of who to vote for. I'm sure all of you have already decided, or not all of you, obviously, most of you have already decided, but I thought it's a difficult decision to make. So how do you make a better decision when you need to make a difficult decision? And there's a book by Daniel Kahneman called Noise. And in this book, he talks about a better way to do job interviews. So I thought, why not apply this method to the election and try to answer the question of who will do less harm, Trump and Vance or Harris and Walz? So how do you decide on difficult questions like this? Well, Kahneman suggests that you first decompose your qualifications for your candidate into 4 essential job functions. Then test those competencies one by one and do not move on to the next test until you've completed the previous test. Then after you have all the information, that's when you talk to your team, or in this case, kind of confer with yourself and see who you want to vote for. So hopefully the process will become clear as we do it. So what are going to be our 4 essential tests for the President of the United States? This is a really hard question. What competencies should the President have? So I just Googled it and I found an article by John Dickerson. And he wrote this article in 2012 for Slate. And he said, political skill, management ability, persuasiveness, and temperament should be the 4 qualities that a president has. Then he listed questions to ask about each of those qualities. So I've listed those questions, the abbreviated form of those questions here. And for our purposes, we won't use all of them. But let's go through those questions quick, just kind of get an idea of what the qualifications should be. Political skill. So can the candidate read the political landscape, be honest enough to win voters' trust, but ruthless enough to cut a deal with enemies? And can the candidate be comfortable with schmoozing, backslapping, and ego massaging? So obviously, John Dickerson thinks that kiss-up culture is an important part of the presidency, which makes sense because you're meeting people for the first time. You're mixing it up with a lot of very popular people with big egos who need to support you with, money, donors. So it makes sense that you should probably be good, maybe even an extrovert, in order to be able to be outgoing and energized when meeting people for the first time. And being good with small talk might be important. Persuasiveness is listed. Can he or she deliver a good speech? Know when to stay quiet. Read public opinion. Short circuit Congress by taking an issue directly to the people. I thought that one was pretty interesting. The other ones make sense to me. I like know when to stay quiet. I like that one a lot. And the short circuit Congress, by taking an issue directly to the people, I thought was interesting because I didn't necessarily think that would be an important quality for a president to have in a well-functioning government, because shouldn't Congress and the president be able to work together without the president having to short circuit Congress? But that's listed as one of the qualities a president should have, according to John Dickerson. Temperament. Has the candidate ever faced a true crisis? Does he or she have the equanimity to handle the erratic and unpredictable pressures of the office? How is he or she with uncertainty? I really like these as well. Equanimity is a word that's I commonly associate with stoicism and stoic qualities of leadership. Stoicism is basically the ability to be calm in the midst of uncertainty, to take life as it comes, but not to try to control everything, to only focus on what you can control. It's what psychologists might call an internal locus of control. You're focused on the things that you can influence, you're realistic, and you're not trying to change things that you cannot control. So equanimity and uncertainty and how to deal with uncertainty is usually equanimity. That's the way to deal with uncertainty if you're going to be a good leader, according to Stoicism. So the philosophy of Stoicism. Management ability. Be focused enough to follow an overarching vision, but nimble enough to tweak that vision. Admit mistakes and learn from them. Sift through complex ideas. Recognize baloney. So, in other words, untruthfulness and lies, or what some people might call BS. And then hire a good team. So these are awesome. I love this one because hiring a good team is a big part of the presidency, because you cannot possibly make all the decisions on your own. You need a good cabinet. You need people who are running the agencies of the government competently. And a person's ability to hire a good team is very important in being a president, because in spite of what the news or the publicity, the limelight might lead you to think, the president is really not, I think, as powerful as people make the president out to be, because it's the system as a whole. Who are the donors? Who are giving money to the president? And who are the president's teammates? Who are influencing the president and his cabinet? And who are the people that are pressuring the president to make certain decisions that are even outside of his cabinet? Former presidents are very influential in the United States. Party leaders, party delegates are highly influential. And the president may even in some ways be subservient to party delegates, as we saw this summer with President Biden. He clearly wanted to run for president of the United States. However, the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party delegates essentially forced him to make his decision. Not necessarily forced him, he could have continued on, but they basically made it clear that they were not going to support him and that he was going to lose without their support if he continued to run for president. And that, and by all appearances, that's what happened. However, I'm sure people would debate the details of that, and whether or not that could be put as forcefully as I just said is up for debate. But that's what it appeared happened to me from my perspective. But hiring a good team is very important because, again, it's not just the president. So I don't want to get into judging the candidates. I want to run the tests and then see. So what I've done here is I've tried to compile some information and do it in a way that's not too obvious of who I'm talking about, and give you the opportunity to rate the candidate for the job of President of the United States. So what I'd like to do is use what's called a Likert scale. It's just a scale of, I think, 0 to 5. 0 to 5 or 1 to 5. We'll find out here in a second. So you're going to use this, I think it's 1 to 5 scale, and I am going to put up John Dickerson's recommendations for the competencies, the 4 competencies for President of the United States. And what I'd like you to do is to read through this information with me and make a judgment before we move on to the next slide. And we're going to do one candidate and then we're going to do the other candidate. And I want you to just write this down on a piece of paper, your number, so you can just have basically, I would say, get a piece of paper, have room for 8 ratings, and then another 8 ratings. So you can just number it 1 through 8, and that's going to be your number where you're going to put either 1 through 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So 5 is, this is a awesome 100%. I like this, and 1 is no, it's not good, don't like it at all. Okay, and you're just going to scale it, make a judgment. So candidate 0. Here we go. Political skill. All right, is he or she honest enough to win voters' trust? We're just going to take a couple of the questions. We're not going to do all of them. All right, so honest enough to win voters' trust. So this candidate on October 1st of 2024 had received $336 million from outside donors. So they say outside money. So basically, I don't think this money is affiliated with a big business or wealthy donors. I'm not exactly sure if that's what it means. I put this together quickly and it was hard enough just to compile this information. So you can look at the sources at the end if you're curious. But if this money is coming from individual donors from the public, then to me, this is going to be a sign of their trust in the candidate. Okay, so $336 million is the number. Out of 88, they got a score of, out of 86, they got a score of 47 for honesty and a 33% honesty score. So these are from surveys, so they're not always on a scale of 0 to 100. It's really confusing. Some of these tests I'm taking are comparing the two candidates, so bear that in mind. So basically, you're just looking for higher numbers or higher percentages to see how much the people who've completed these surveys are trusting or approving of the candidate. Political skill. Does the candidate care about the needs of ordinary people? So if the candidate is successfully conveying that they care about the needs of ordinary people, they should get a higher score. 51 out of 95, and then 35%. Does the candidate have a good sense of humor? 55 out of 104. Does the candidate stand up for what they believe in? 60 out of 129. Okay? So make a judgment. Try to keep it systematic and do a number on a scale of 1 to 5 there. Okay? Now we're going to move on to ruthless enough to cut a deal with enemies. Candidate committee money. Okay, so this is the people in the party that it's coming from the committee, from the party that the candidate is running under. So this is $685 million. And then ranking the candidate on mentally sharp. 61. Is the candidate well informed? 52 out of 101. The fame rating for the candidate, 97%, pretty high. Popularity, 54%. Okay? I know you don't have a whole lot to compare this to, and so it makes it difficult. So try to keep this in mind, because for both candidates, you want to do the same type of test. So if you feel like 50% popularity deserves a 3, then try to do that for the next candidate too. Or you can just kind of guesstimate, however you want to do it. This is just really an experiment to see if we can make more of an objective decision about these candidates without, really having all the news and the bias and and that outside influence on us. So 685 million, it's a lot. It's a lot of money there. We're going to go to persuasiveness. Does the candidate know when to stay quiet? So I just tried to use, again, information from surveys. 39% said the candidate's focused. 24% said the candidate's tolerant. 28% said the candidate is tough. 31% said the candidate's weak. 14% said the candidate's racist. So if the candidate's, extreme, racist, and chaotic, there might not be a whole lot of motivation to stay quiet. I don't know. That's an overgeneralization. Obviously, these qualities don't perfectly correlate. It was hard enough to find information like this where people just rate how much does this word describe the candidate. So it's pretty great to just find this information. And not going to perfectly correlate to persuasiveness, but it's an experiment. So try to just rank it as best you can. Is the candidate up to the challenges facing the United States? 45% say yes. Shares my values. So the people who were rating the candidate said yes or no, the candidate shares my values. 40% said yes. Represents change. 40% said yes. Can the candidate take an issue directly to the people? So 26% said the candidate's unifying, 21% divisive, 30% said the candidate's a normal person, 24% said the candidate's weird, 36% said the candidate's optimistic, 6% said the candidate is pessimistic, 35% said the candidate's dishonest, and 20% said the candidate's mainstream. Okay? And then 34% said the candidate will benefit people like me, and 36% said will benefit those unlike me. So, okay. So when you're doing this, you should have 1 through 4 ranked at this point before we move on to the next slide. You should have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for political skill is 1 and 2. And persuasiveness for 3 and 4, okay? So if you're running this experiment, you'll have your numbers there. So just don't take too much time, just go ahead and try it out. 1 and 2 are under political skill, 3 and 4 are under persuasiveness, and you need a number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for each of those, okay? Temperament. Has the candidate ever faced a true crisis? So again, most of this is survey research, they're just ranking the candidate. We know that both of these candidates have faced crises, okay? Is the candidate down to earth? 51 out of 89. Is the candidate a good role model? 53 out of 87. Is the candidate even-tempered? 64 out of 96. Favorability rating, 47.5%. And then another favorability rating from a different poll, 48.2%, okay? So this is just, even-tempered is a good kind of idea of, can this candidate face a crisis? If you're even-tempered, you'll probably do better in a crisis. I mean, I would assume that, because it's hard to think if you're stressed or anxious. So down to earth, probably going to do better if people feel like the candidate's down to earth. They'll probably handle the crisis in a way that they like. And then, of course, you usually will want good role models handling crises. So how is a candidate with uncertainty? Here we're getting into the equanimity ratings. So I was running out of polls. So this is from the debate between the two candidates. And, excuse me. So I just took some of the ratings from the debate, because if you're rating a debate, you're going to be rating how the person's performing. So, and in a debate, there's uncertainty. Will the people like this answer? Will people, how do I respond in the way that's going to win the most votes? So there's a lot of uncertainty in debates, and there's a lot of nerves. So hopefully this is somewhat helpful. Of course, it's just from one debate, so you can bear that in mind if you want. But 50% said the candidate was coherent. 28% said the candidate was presidential. Doesn't seem very good. And then you can read the rest. So go through those now, and this is going to be your number 5 and number 6, and get a rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each of those. Management ability. So, is the candidate focused enough to follow an overarching vision, but nimble enough to tweak that vision? So let's go answer these 2 questions quickly and get those ratings for number 7 and number 8. So these are all under candidate 0. Remember that. Cut taxes, make housing more affordable and achievable, grow small businesses, invest in entrepreneurs, take on bad actors and bring down costs, protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare, support American innovation and workers, lower energy costs. This is the vision of this candidate. This is taken from the things they're suggesting on doing during their presidency. So you have that vision. So judge that vision and say, is this person focused enough to follow an overarching vision? And obviously I've abbreviated the vision of the candidates for the purposes of fitting onto a slide. But is the candidate nimble enough to tweak that vision? So how do we judge that? Well, let's take some ratings of the candidates, the impressions that some people have of the candidate. So do people think the candidate has a clear plan? 44%. Do they approve the way he or she handled the job that they had before, hypothetically, they will become president? So 41% approved of this candidate's job, the work they did in their previous job, okay? Who would do a better job with cost of living? So these were comparing both candidates. And 40% say cost of living, this candidate would do better. 38%, this candidate is going to do better on crime. 37% said this candidate is going to do better on immigration. 49% said this candidate is going to do better on abortion. And 47% said this candidate is going to do better on democracy. Okay? Get your last ratings done, number 7 and number 8 for candidate 0, because we're about to move on to candidate 00. Okay? So 1 and 2, political skill for candidate 00. Honest enough to win voters' trust. Let's look at the outside money that this candidate has received as of the 1st of October 2024. $335 million. Okay? Is the candidate honest? 39 out of 86. And 24%. Does the candidate care for needs of ordinary people? 44 out of 95. Only cares about his or herself? 51%. Has a good sense of humor? 49 out of 104. Stands up for what they believe in? 69 out of 129. Now I know what you're thinking is, maybe you'll be thinking this, is that you want to compare to the previous candidate. And I may make another video that kind of does that if this doesn't work out too well. Just kind of switch the slides around. But I think that for this purpose, just try to keep it the same type of rating. Just take the numbers and just rate it. Because the way that the test is suggested from Daniel Kahneman is not to just compare them side by side, because then you would have to have both of your job applicants in the same room, and you'd be saying, what's your answer and what's your answer? And that's kind of how we usually decide presidential candidates, is by comparing them. We want them to be on a debate stage. But that's not really how job interviews happen. So we're trying to keep it more like a job interview. So try to just keep it the same way you rated before, not the same number, but just try to keep it the same. Whatever your judgment is, you want to make a similar judgment. However you're making the decision, you want to do the same thing, whether that's a guesstimation or saying 50% sounds like a 3. Whatever you want to do, try to do it like that. Okay? So, candidate committee money, $306 million. Okay? Mentally sharp, 52 out of 113. Well-informed, 49 out of 101. Fame, 98%. Really high fame rating. Popularity, 42%. So try to get your first numbers down for 1 and 2 under political skill, and we'll move on to persuasiveness. All right, can he or she know when to stay quiet? 31% say the candidate's focused. 9% say the candidate's tolerant. 41% say the candidate is tough. 24% say the candidate's weak. 40% say the candidate's racist. 43% say the candidate's extreme. And 47% say the candidate is chaotic. So this candidate would probably be pretty persuasive with racist, extreme, and chaotic people, and people who admire toughness, but maybe not as persuasive with people who like tolerance. But it really depends on the population that the candidate is serving and what they want. So is the candidate up to the challenges facing the United States? 45% say yes. Does the candidate share my values? 37% say yes. Does the candidate represent change? 45% say yes. Can he or she take an issue directly to the people? So is this candidate going to help, take an issue to the people? And these things, again, are not perfect correlations to whether or not the candidate can do that, but I thought they should help. So 14% of people say this candidate is unifying. 36% say this candidate is divisive. 15% say this candidate's normal. 38% say this candidate is weird. 24% say this candidate's optimistic. 19% say this candidate is pessimistic. 45% say this candidate is dishonest. And 9% say this candidate is mainstream. So will the candidate benefit people like me? 34% say yes. Will the candidate benefit those unlike me? 43% say yes. Okay? So kind of interesting on this candidate. 34% say that the candidate will benefit people like me, but then 43% say the candidate will benefit those unlike me. So is it a good thing or a bad thing that the candidate is benefiting people unlike you? That's an interesting idea. Like how okay are you with the candidate benefiting other people than yourself? Some people might be upset by that, but some people might be like, oh, I have a good life. I don't mind if, the candidate benefits people that don't look like me here. So anyway, temperament. Has a candidate ever faced a true crisis? So this is going to be number 5 and number 6. And you have to do, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for number 5 and number 6. So under temperament, candidate's down to earth, 38. The candidate is a good role model, 34. The candidate is even-tempered, 32. Favorability rating, 42.9%. And then another favorability rating of 44%. So, overall, just make your judgment on what you think about those ratings. And then we're going to move to number 6 here. How is he or she with uncertainty? So during the debate, the candidate was 28% said coherent, 35% said presidential, 39% said strong, 49% said untruthful, 34% said focused on policy, and 36% said competent. So get your rating together for that. And we're going to move on to number 7 and number 8 under management ability. So let's check out this candidate's management ability. We're almost done. Is the candidate focused enough to follow an overarching vision? So this candidate's vision is to fight for and protect Social Security, to unite our country, to keep the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, to strengthen and modernize our military, to defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, to implement large tax cuts for workers, and to stop outsourcing. So this is where it really comes into your opinion. Your opinion is really coming in here because you have to have a knowledge of what these things mean and how you rate that vision. Can't really just go by the survey numbers at this point. So is the candidate nimble enough to tweak that vision? 44% say the candidate has a clear path to solve America's problems, or a clear plan to solve America's problems. 41% approve of the way he or she handled the job, and 42% say the candidate would do better with cost of living. With crime, 43% say the candidate would do better than the other candidate. With immigration, 47% say the candidate would do better than the other candidate. For abortion, 31% say the candidate would do better than the other candidate. And for democracy, 34% say the candidate would do better than the other candidate. So again, don't think of these percentages on a scale of 0 to 100 because they're not. These are one answer out of they're probably like, that's the problem is with these answers, it was a multiple choice. So these are the people that said absolutely that the candidate will do better than the other candidate. So sorry I'm explaining this at the end, but you cannot, I think I mentioned earlier on, don't think of it as out of 100 because it's not. But even if you think of it that way, it's not the worst way to think about it because the reality is that both of these were taken from the same surveys. So if you're ranking it the same way, it might still work because both candidates, weren't scoring in like the 90s on these surveys, except for like fame. But all right, let's move on to the delayed holistic judgment. So you should have 7 and 8 ranked. Let's just run this experiment, maybe a crappy experiment, but we're trying it. Okay. Delayed holistic judgment. Candidate 00, the one we just completed, is Donald J. Trump. He has a bachelor's degree in science, a bachelor's of science in economics that he got in 1968 from the University of Pennsylvania, if degrees matter to you. He's had 3 spouses and is currently married to Melania, who just came out with a book that you can check out if you want. He has been a business owner of multiple different businesses. He has been a television host and producer. He has been a president of an organization, and he has been the president of the United States. Okay? Most of you know that. So if you want to get really into this on how your score was, you can do a total score of your Likert scale ratings. So that's going to be your 1 through 8 for candidate 00. You can add them all together. The 1 through 8, the scale of 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can add that together and get a total score. Then you can take that total score and divide it by 8 to get your average score, which is also known as the mean score. Then, I forget how to get the median. Just look it up. I don't want to think about it and waste time on the video. The mode is going to be the most common number that you rate. So, like, the one that occurs most frequently on 1 through 8. okay? And I'm happy to do an example of this in the next video if this one doesn't work out too well. All right, Kamala Harris. She is candidate 0. She's the first candidate we ranked. She has a bachelor's of political science and economics that she received in 1986 from Howard University, and she's a lawyer. She went to graduated from Hastings Law College, University of California, in 1989. She has had one spouse, and I'm not trying to be biased with the spouses thing because there's plenty of relationship drama with Kamala Harris that you can look up, and I'm sure you already know about some of it. But she has only been married once, and her husband is Doug Emhoff. All right. She was vice president of the United States. She still is. So she will be vice president through at least January of 2024. She was a U.S. Senator from California. She was Attorney General of California, District Attorney of San Francisco, and Deputy District Attorney. So she has been in different places with her schooling. She lived in Canada when she was young, but she also was, at Howard University. So she spent some time on the East Coast. But a lot of her time was spent in California. A lot of her working life was spent in California, and a lot of it was spent in government. Whereas for Trump, he spent most of his time on the East Coast, growing up in New York. And, now I know he spends a lot of time in Florida. But he seems like he's more of an East Coast kind of guy. But also less of a government guy, more of a businessman. He's been president for 4 years. So he's worked in government. And I'm sure he's mixed it up with a lot of government officials. But, more really doing business and less of the government and politics. So for your candidate 0, add up the total score of your numbers for the qualifications or the questions 1 through 8, the 4 qualifications and the questions 1 through 8. That total score will go there on the first, and then you can just put it on your paper. And then you'll divide that total score by 8 to get your mean score or your average. Look up how to do the median. I'll have that better for the next video. And then the mode. Okay, the mode is going to be the one that occurred the most frequently. And then you can look at your data and kind of make a decision. And if you really want to educate yourself, which you probably should if you're going to use, the mode to make your decision, you should know what the mode is. So you can just kind of look more information up on that online. So I hope this kind of gave you some good information. The total score, might be just a good way to, rank it. I think that would probably just be the most obvious way to kind of say, did I, who would I have chosen if I had just done this test? And that's really the piece of information that I think is really we're going for out of this presentation. So who will do less harm? It's impossible to make an objective decision, I feel like, about presidents because of the media cycle. And it's impossible to make an objective decision about job applicants too, which is what Daniel Kahneman and the authors of Noise point out in the book. So it's impossible, but it's fun to try. It's fun to try to take out some of the bias and some of the noise and see if we can create a type of way to influence our decision or to get more information that's not so smothered by other information and other information that can kind of skew our more objective tendencies. So there's the sources. I drew a lot of this information, this polling data from those websites. And I really referenced Kahneman's book, but I read these other books, when thinking about making my own decisions about the candidates. So they're listed, although I didn't use them heavily in the presentation. And then other sources that I pulled from, specifically John Dickerson's questions in Slate. And then you can look up those other sources for more information. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope it helped you, think about this a little bit differently. And hopefully you can think about the election process a little bit more objectively with the help of the job interview suggestion from Daniel Kahneman. That website should be listed. There it is, Stillman 2021. That's a great, that last source. I would recommend looking at that article to learn more about Daniel Kahneman's job interview process, because this could benefit you not only when you're trying to make decisions about who to vote for, but also when you're trying to make decisions about who to hire if you have a business, or when you're thinking about, how people might think about you in a job interview. I really like that article by Stillman because it kind of abbreviates the suggestions from Daniel Kahneman that are listed in noise. So, all right, whatever you do this election year, get out and vote. Take care. I'm gonna go for a run because this stuff stressed me out.